We have another Republican Nazi group chat? We just had a Republican Nazi group chat come out last week. Now, Trump's nominee for special counsel of the United States, a man named Paul Ingrassia, has had a whole host of disgusting messages get leaked. He said, quote, MLK Jr. was the 1960s George Floyd, and his holiday should be ended and tossed into the seventh circle of hell where it belongs. He also said that holidays commemorating Black people, such as Black History Month or Juneteenth, should all be eviscerated, although he did use an Italian slur for Black people, according to The Guardian. Someone else in the group chat told Paul Ingrassia that he, quote, belongs in Hitler Youth. And Ingrassia responded, quote, I do have a Nazi streak in me from time to time. I will admit it. This person, Paul Ingrassia, has had several roles in the Trump administration. He was a White House liaison to the Justice Department. He was in the Department of Homeland Security. He was nominated in May to lead the Office of Special Counsel. And now, this week, he is facing a confirmation hearing to be U.S. Special Counsel. His lawyer is telling the press that these text messages, quote, clearly read as self-deprecating and satirical humor. They're making fun of the fact that liberals call MAGA supporters Nazis. Then why aren't they making fun of liberals in those messages? Why didn't he respond, oh yeah, that's what the libtards say about me? Why did he say, I do have a Nazi streak? They would say, oh yeah, the liberals totally think I have a Nazi streak. Why would you admit it? Like, what you say in a private chat, that's really where your brain is. If someone accused you, even satirically, of being a Nazi, if you're not a Nazi, like most reasonable and decent and normal fucking people are, you would say, no, what? No. Why is it so hard for them to just disavow Nazism? Why is that so hard? Guys, this is what the Republican Party is now. Wake up.
We have some major breaking news. A Trump nominee had his text messages leaked. He's been exposed for making extremely racist remarks, saying Martin Luther King Jr. Day belongs in hell, and even comparing himself to 1930s Germany. His name is Paul Ingrassia, and he is Trump's nominee to lead the Office of Special Counsel. Now let's take a look at some things he had to say. Here's the first one. He says Martin Luther King Jr. was the 1960s George Floyd, and his holiday should be ended and tossed into the seventh circle of hell where it belongs. This other guy in the group chat said Paul belongs in the Mustache Man Youth with Steve Bannon. Paul responds saying, I do have a 1930s Germany streak in me from time to time, I will admit it. Here's another one with his racism on full display saying, never trust a Chinaman or Indian. Never. Here's a couple more. He says, we're making Kwanzaa illegal in the next Trump admin. That was the gist of my goal. That right there is an Italian slur used to describe Black people. He says, no more of those holidays. From Kwanzaa to MLK Jr. Day to Black History Month to Juneteenth, every single one needs to be eviscerated. Yeah, so this guy is clearly not qualified to lead the Office of Special Counsel. Keep in mind, that office is supposed to enforce ethics rules in the government and protect whistleblowers. So it's not a very good idea to nominate somebody for that position who said civil rights heroes' holidays need to be thrown into the seventh circle of hell. It's definitely not looking very good for the new generation of Republican leadership. These guys are out of their minds.
Mr. Trump, I'm your supporter, but I gotta ask you this question. What the fuck are you doing giving $40 billion to your buddy in Argentina? And you haven't even given the Americans any money yet.
That's a good question, sir, and I understand your frustration. He went on to say, I got stimulus checks from Obama and Biden and Clinton. I didn't get anything from you. What's going on? And remember, sir, we're in a government shutdown right now. TSA workers, air traffic controllers not getting paid, lines getting longer at the airports. They're even trying to weasel out of paying them back pay when this all gets figured out. But don't worry, he is taking steps to make things better. He started something today that I'm sure is going to improve your life drastically. Yeah, he started demolishing part of the White House. They're doing demolition on the White House to make room for his grand ballroom that he wants to build to the tune of, wait for it, $250 million. Government shutdown is still currently happening, but they're tearing apart the White House. Which goes against what he claimed he would do back in July when he said, I won't interfere with the current building. It'll be near it, but not touching it, and pays total respect to the existing building, which I am the biggest fan of. Destroying portions of a historic landmark to build some god-awful Mar-a-Lago-esque ballroom for $250 million paid by the American taxpayer. you don't have a stimulus check, and people who work for the federal government aren't getting paid, and Argentina's getting $40 billion. Is this what you voted for? Hey, Meg, is this what any of you voted for? Are we great again yet? Are we?
A day that ends in Y, another day where a Republican was caught being racist. Introduce Paul Ingracia, Trump's nominee to head up the Office of Special Counsel. Why does he fucking look like a Bram Stoker vampire? Let's go through them. Let's start off with some MLK racism, saying that MLK Jr. was the 1960s version of George Floyd, and that holiday should be tossed into the seventh circle of hell. Then he admits he has a Yahtzee streak in him. Whew. Then he has some racism about China. And last but not least, he wanted to make sure everybody was encapsulated in a nice little group chat right here. Kwanzaa, MLK, Black History Month, Juneteenth, everything eviscerated. I'm starting to think it might be easier for them to release the text message strands and text chains that aren't racist. That might be more shocking. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
All right, we have some major breaking news. Another Republican, this time a Trump admin nominee, was caught saying that he's on a quote-unquote Nazi streak and that MLK's holiday belongs in hell. We need to dig more into this issue of the radicalization of not only young men in America, but everybody in America on the right. Ever since Donald Trump stepped foot into politics, as I pointed out on stage a few nights ago, everything has become more radical. His entire claim to fame in U.S. politics was saying Obama's not born in America. That's how he gained political fame, coming up with nicknames for the other side and saying he wants to lock up his opponents. That is all he did from 2012 to 2016 was conspiracy theories, mainstreaming them, being absolutely sickening, and now we see the effect of people who are 20, 30, 40, people who in their formative years only heard the President of the United States saying this insanely hateful stuff. And I'm not making this up. I've seen it normalized in my generation. I talk about this in a debate that's coming up soon. But let's just start with this Politico article. And I urge you to stick around until the end because I'm bringing on Jon Favreau, who hosts a podcast about this, and we have a really good conversation about this. So drop a like, follow the Adam Mockler feed, and this reads, Trump nominee says MLK Jr. holiday belongs in hell and that he has a Nazi streak, according to texts. Paul Ingracia's bid to lead a whistleblower agency is set for a Senate confirmation hearing Thursday. Listen to this. Paul Ingracia, President Donald Trump's embattled nominee to lead the Office of Special Counsel, told a group of fellow Republicans in a text chain the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday should be tossed in the seventh circle of hell and said he was, quote, on a Nazi streak. He has a, quote, Nazi streak. These are people who are going to be high up in the Trump administration. Ingracia, who has a Senate confirmation hearing scheduled Thursday, made the remarks in a chain with a half dozen Republican operatives and influencers. This is becoming normalized within the Republican Party, and it's due to people like Stephen Miller, people like Donald Trump, people like Caroline Leavitt. Just a few days ago, Caroline Leavitt's a little bit more new on the scene, but just a few days ago, Caroline Leavitt said that the entire Democratic voter base is comprised of Hamas terrorists, illegal immigrants, and criminals. And then 2 days later, she proceeded to post a video of the No Kings protests saying that these were just lame old people or whatever. So she simultaneously wants all liberals to be these dangerous criminals, but they're also all so lame. Which is it? It's like simultaneously weak and strong at the same time. It's insane. And that is part of the problem. The dehumanization of the other side as a whole is part of the problem. Quote, MLK Jr. was the 1960s George Floyd, and his holiday should be ended and tossed into the seventh circle of hell where it belongs. Ingracia wrote in January of 2024.
These guys go on strike. It's really a shame. So I'm asking them to be smart. It's not working. They're getting killed in the polls. The public understands what they're doing. They're doing the wrong thing. And with that, I just want to say welcome to the White House. When we're finished, they do a great job. When they're finished, we're going to all come in. It'll be a little crowded, but that's okay. Into the Oval Office, we'll talk a little bit, a couple of minutes. Got some interesting things. And I think I'd like to have, if I could, John, come up and say a few words, and we can close it out. And by the way, this is an open mic. It's open to the world. I think they can hear me out on the street. If anybody wants to come up and say after John, say it. We're all friends, and you can speak your heart out. But we've got to get our government open, and the Democrats are trying to keep it closed. Thank you. John, please.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for having us. This is the fourth week of the Democrat shutdown, but we are all here today because your Republican team in the Senate is unified. We are.
So once again, we have a violation of the Hatch Act where our elected officials are using their positions of power to spread misinformation and propaganda that is not neutral, that is partisan. That's not legal.
The longest full shutdown in history, but everybody here has voted now 11 different times to open up the government, and we are going to keep voting to open up the government, and eventually the Democrats, hopefully sooner or later, are going to come around. But Mr. President, your agenda is the right one for this country. This is your team. We are your partners in achieving and implementing the agenda that you campaigned on and the American people voted for. And you just mentioned it has been a series of promises made and promises kept, whether it's national security, whether it's the border, whether it's the economy.
A lot of people are talking about the Insurrection Act right now, but most of what you're hearing leaves out the part that matters most: why it exists and who it's supposed to protect. I teach history, and this Saturday, as people prepare to march in cities across the country, I want you to understand exactly what this law means, how it's been used, and how your rights still stand if you know them. At its heart, this is about power, the First Amendment, and our right to stand together peacefully. This Saturday, people across the country will march under the banner No Kings, peaceful, determined, and unarmed. It's a reminder that in this nation, power flows upward from the people to those who govern, not the other way around. But the White House has been threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act, a centuries-old law that lets a president use federal troops on U.S. soil. The idea was first written into law in 1807, when the young republic was still reeling from uprisings like Shays' Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion. It was meant to restore order when states couldn't or wouldn't. In over 2 centuries, it's only been used a handful of times, almost always to defend constitutional rights rather than suppress them. Eisenhower invoked it in 1957 to enforce school desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas, protecting the constitutional rights of Black students when the state defied the Supreme Court. Kennedy used it in 1962 to ensure James Meredith could enroll at the University of Mississippi, upholding the rule of law against violent resistance to integration. Each time, it was meant to protect rights, not to crush them, and that distinction matters. Today, invoking the Insurrection Act against peaceful protesters would flip the law on its head. It would use military power against the very people the Constitution was designed to protect. That's not law enforcement, that's authoritarianism. The First Amendment is clear. We have the right to speak out, to assemble, and to petition our government for change. These rights don't evaporate because a president finds dissent inconvenient. The test of a democracy isn't how it treats its loyalists, it's how it treats its citizens. If troops are sent into cities like Portland, Oregon, or Chicago, Illinois this weekend, it will be up to governors, the courts, and the people to stand firm. People. Military leaders have a duty to refuse unlawful orders.
I watched Trump's speech in the Rose Garden today, so you don't have to, and here's my overview, and I can save some of you 5 or 6 minutes here. If you're looking for him to have said something new, he does not in this speech. So first of all, he spoke for like 45 minutes. He doesn't understand that when presidents speak, it's supposed to be 15, 20 minutes-ish, and that's about it. And he is doing this just as an introduction to a lunch that he's going to do. Somehow, still in those 45 minutes, he brought up Biden 4 times. So he starts off by saying that the White House that he took over was a building in distress and that no one had taken care of it. In fact, every time they had a press conference in the Rose Garden, everyone would sink into the mud, and then women would complain to him afterwards, you ruined my shoes. So that's why he's tearing down walls of the East Wing. He says that he was a better president than George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Why, you might ask? Because he, quote, put out 8 wars, which again, it's 0. He says we have a great relationship with China, but that they want to discuss something with him. What do they want to discuss, you might ask? Well, he says it's the 157% tariff that we have on them. Yesterday, he said it was a 55% tariff that would raise up to 155% on November 1st if they don't change their rules around their export controls on rare earth elements. Now, again, he's just making up these numbers, which is why yesterday it's 55 and also 155, and today it's 157, and, a week ago it was 145. He's just making it all up. None of this is real. I can't emphasize this enough. Everything that comes out of his mouth is a delusion in his head. None of it is real. If it was real, there would be real actual numbers. There are no real actual numbers because none of this is real. He says that tariffs equal national security. He doesn't care to expand on that thought, just presents it and moves on. He also says that of the 8 wars he solved, again, it's 0, that 5 of them were as a result of tariffs and trade. Again, it's 0, and also yesterday he said 4, 5, and 6 of them. Again, it's all made up. He says he saw an ad from Canada, not a specific company, but just Canada, that said, don't go with tariffs. I don't know if Canada is putting out national ads, but I highly doubt if they are that they say, don't go with tariffs. He then tells the anecdote about how his staff found $31 billion, and he was like, it's probably on the tariff shelf, just check there. And then they apparently checked the tariff shelf, and there was the $31 billion. His administration does not even know that tariffs has started in certain sectors when he says they've started, because again, none of this is real. He says the reason that we're $37 trillion in debt is because of tariffs. No explanation. He says before he concreted over the entire Rose Garden that it was unusable. He also says that everyone is there in attendance except for maybe one person, but you'll never guess who that person is. But here's a hint, they vote no on everything. He says at one point that he had Tim Scott as a surrogate for him, but he didn't want Tim Scott because he likes to have a, quote, lunatic to talk for him. He brags about replacing Biden's picture in the Presidential Walk of Fame with the auto pen. He then says that the auto pen person says that they never spoke to Biden, even though he said before that this were close cabinet members who were doing these things illegally behind his back. And he also said, they treated us so badly that I think you're now allowed to speak the truth. As if he had been lying before, or no one had spoken the truth, or whatever. Again, he's just making it all up. Here's a direct quote with no context. James and James, my double James, I call them. My uncle's name is John, and he's married to another John, and we call them the Johns, not the double Johns. Just throwing that out there. I'm no constitutional scholar, but he says that one Democratic senator can block any judge appointment that he makes. You could have 99 Republican senators and 1 Democrat, and they can block all of the judge appointments that are made. Obviously, that's not true. He also says that they passed the Lake and Riley Act in order to get illegal immigrants out of the country. The Lake and Riley Act just forces the Department of Homeland Security to detain individuals who are charged with certain offenses, regardless of whether or not they are convicted, which is something that he has claimed that he could already do without passing any legislation, because he said that anyone who came into our country illegally should be removed and can be removed without him passing any laws. This would be a law that doesn't even say that it's doing the thing that he says it's doing. He says we brought in $17 trillion in investment, and it's going to be $20 trillion by the end of the year. And he says a lot of that comes from tariffs. And then he says they used to build them elsewhere and there was no charge. To just emphasize the fact that he does not understand how a tariff works, because if they built it elsewhere, there would be a charge on American citizens to pay more to import that product, because that's how a tariff works. It's a tax on an imported good paid by the importer that is then usually passed down to the consumer, aka you. That's a tax that you pay as a result of Donald Trump. He says he did a great job with COVID. I guess 1 million Americans dead. Not so bad. He also says that China built their entire military with money that they stole from us through tariffs that they had put on us, and that no president had ever been able to stop that before or even see that it was happening, including, I guess, him in his first administration, because he continually forgets that he was the president before. Again, none of this is real. It's all lies, obviously, but none of it is real. Even the things that he claims are true, including later in the speech, he will claim that already there is no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, and no tax on overtime. He claims those things are already in place. Please, someone show me a pay stub. I will shut down this entire fucking account if there is a single person who is getting no tax on tips. He says there are beautiful black women in Chicago with red hats on because they don't want to get mugged. He doesn't really expand on that. Also, he says in Chicago, in a recent period of time, there have been 4,000 murders. He does not explain the amount of time. He says that there is zero crime in DC. You can look up crime statistics. There is still crime in DC. He also says the big beautiful bill was so big and comprehensive that we never need to pass another piece of legislation ever again. I swear to God, he says that. He's talking about Mike Johnson and some other guy, and he's comparing them to each other, and he's saying that they're exact opposites. And then here are the things that he says are exact opposites. One of them is tall, and one of them is not so tall. I swear to God. Even though the Democrats have only had one stance in the past year or so, and that's we're not going to allow you to cut medical care for people in this country, he says that Democrats will lose Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security because the country will be broke if they take over. And then he goes in this long tirade about how presidents who win the election often lose the midterms. And he says that no one can explain why, and he has no idea why that happens. He says the government has never been shut down before. 3 of the 11 shutdowns since 1980 all occurred under his presidency. Since 1980, he has 27% of all government shutdowns under his presidency, but he claims it's never happened before. You might actually believe it this time. He says, we have the hottest country ever. We are the hottest country in the world, and a year and a half ago, we were a dead country. Just a side note, I love when he says that to the military because they were actively deployed around the world during the entire Biden administration, and they would have known, of course, that we were not a dead country because we continued to be the world police during the entire Biden administration. But of course, we were dead. It's hilarious that he says that to military members. He says that AOC never took a course on the environment. I don't know what that means, but he did say it. He also says that Democrats don't even understand their own agenda. He says Mom Donnie is a communist. He says that he said that we would never have a socialist elected in this country, and that he's still right because we skipped over socialism and went straight to communism. It's hilarious that these people, his entire administration included, does not want to learn what these terms mean. These political terms, they don't want to learn what they mean when they are actively politicians in this country. It is hilariously incompetent on their part. I mean, mind-bendingly incompetent. He says Democrats are responsible for all the delays with air traffic control. Now, you might be asking, how is that possible? Well, he says when Pete Buttigieg was the Secretary of Transportation, that he took a bunch of glass wires and he connected them with copper wires, and then they tried to turn on the system and nothing happened. And everyone knows you can't connect glass and copper. He's just, again, making it up. None of this is true. None of this is real. And finally, he says, we have Darth Vader. You might remember Russell Vogt, who he says is of Project 2025 fame, even though he's been the director of the Office of Management and Budget in Trump's last administration as well as in this administration. And then finally, he says he asked the president of Somalia if they would like an American citizen to just be given to him, I guess. That last bit, he's talking about Ilhan Omar, if you didn't know. So there you go. I guess it took almost 9 minutes to cover that. I swear to God, I could not make this up. If I tried, I don't have enough imagination to make up the insane things that he says on a daily basis. I also do wish that he would stop talking. But I'm going to watch it anyways, as I've said to you many times before. It doesn't bother me to watch because I'm going to watch it anyways. And if I'm going to watch, I might as well take notes. And if I'm going to take notes, I might as well let you know what happens. So there you go. That's Donald Trump's random introduction to a lunch where he mentioned Joe Biden 4 times. And he said insane things for about 45 minutes. And then I guess they had lunch afterwards.